Hey everybody, this is Andrew Greer with Features on Film, CCM Magazine, and the episode is for the Cover Fellas for the month of October, and we are here with 10th Avenue North. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're super excited. I've kind of read up what some of you guys have been saying on social media and some bio interviews about kind of redefining the definition of success. What is that redefinition of success? What have you been learning in that education of becoming a follower? One, what has that education been? It seems like that's more of a recent, a new understanding, a revelation of what it is to become a follower, a true disciple of Christ, and then how that is actually playing in the dance of career and calling.
Our first 3 records all did really well. Christian radio, a lot of people seemed to be purchasing them. And then we had our last record just seemed to fall into obscurity a little bit. And I think it really kind of, at least for me, I know, kind of threw me and said, okay, what, is this defeating for me? And if it is, why? Mm-hmm. And I think whenever we go through levels of success, we can say all we want that, no, my identity is in Jesus, and I'm loved by Him, and that's what gives me confidence. But you don't really know until you take that success away. And that's when you find out, okay. So the big redefine of success for us as a band, I think, has really just been, okay, let's not think about charts. Let's think about people's stories. I was talking to Matt Maher, and he was talking about people meeting with the Pope, and the Pope had just said that he's not interested in meeting with people who don't understand this, and that is we seek relationship, not opportunity. And then the same way with God, am I seeking God because He's going to create opportunity for me, and because He's going to make me successful in the world's eyes, or am I seeking God for God Himself?
That's that capitalistic kind of Christianity that we've been talking about, like what kind of spirituality are we actually searching for? Was there a collective sense of this within the band, or was it kind of a spark in one that...
Yeah, I don't think we ever sat down and said, this is what we're going to write about on this record. But for me, it's always kind of one of those, what is it that keeps us motivated to keep on going? Like, what is it that...
That's a good way to say it.
What is it that gets me out of the house and away from my 3 kids and my wife and my dog to go on the road, Because that's different now than it was 10 years ago, 8 years ago, where I didn't have a bunch of kids running around the house. Like, now it's going, what is it that's motivating me to walk out this door? And...
Cold, hard cash.
That's, yeah. But for me, it's always been interacting with people, hearing their stories, and hearing how God is using music in a way that I've never... imagine, we'd write a song, and it may not be great at radio, but then that show you're playing that night, they tell you, this song, God used to change my life.
Girl, 2 weeks ago, Fair in Michigan, she came through and said, I was going to take my life 6 months ago, and your song came on my Spotify. And it was a song that,
wasn't even a radio song.
Single, wasn't, commercially viable. And I go, well, if that's not success.
Right. There's a lyric from the new record, the song Control, God, you don't need me, but somehow you want me. Oh, how you love me, somehow that frees me to take my hands off my life. It seems to me like in our culture, we kind of have a culture of surface affection, right? It's social media driven, or we post this or that, and it's about what kind of interaction we're receiving on the surface, likes and loves and whatever. And I feel like that has begun to diminish culturally our understanding of who we actually are, especially from a spiritual reality, that we are loved just as we are. Do you feel that, stories from people, even in your own lives and your families, some of this identity crisis of who are we? And
yeah, we're all trying to feel valuable and loved. And if you don't get that in God, then you're going to look elsewhere for it. And ironically, with social media, what we try to do is we never think of ourselves as a follower. Yeah, that's the name of the record. But we're trying to gain everyone else is our follower, right? And in doing so, I think what we end up doing is when you start obsessing about how many followers you can get, to give you the value that Christ has already offered you, but you're not finding it, you haven't received that, so you're trying to create this value that Christ is going, I want to give it to you right now. And so what you end up doing when you start looking at people as followers, you kind of start looking at them as a commodity. People become commodity. They become usable goods to trade and sell. And when you start using other people that way, you can't help but escape the nagging feeling that that's what they're using you for. A lot of us start to feel, because we see other people that way, we see our relationship with God that way, that as my usefulness rises and falls with God, so does my value. Mm-hmm. But Acts 17 says God's not served by men's hands if he needed anything. So the great truth is that God actually doesn't need you, which means your loveliness to God doesn't rise and fall with your usefulness. Mm-hmm. Can you be more or of less use to God? Sure. Can he use anybody? Absolutely. Does he need to use anybody? Absolutely not. And if God doesn't need us, then he's free to want us. And I think that's true of our relationships with one another. It's only when I don't need, we need each other in that we're built for community, right? But I don't need him to fill my deepest longings. That's when I'm able to want him as a true friend,
Which then you're talking about elements of taking out some of this control in relationship, right? Exactly. And control in general, I feel like we're also in a culture of control, kind of control freakishness. And there's a quote, Mike, that I found of yours, and y'all can decide if you agree with this or not. But my treasure is my life. As soon as you let go of your life as the treasure, then suddenly you find freedom. I don't have to be afraid, because fear is the belief that God's not going to get it right. But culturally, we have this element and need to control. But the reality of surrender, I'd be interested in what that has looked like in your lives. And has there been points of time where you're like, wow, this is what it means to not just talk about surrender, but to actually exercise surrender, to actually let go of control, which then takes a huge amount of faith.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife and I are reading this book, and it's all about letting go of control and feeling burnt out on...
Is it Daring Greatly?
No, it's... Brené Brown does write the foreword to this book I'm talking about.
Present Over Perfect.
Present Over Perfect. And so we're just learning about striving and striving and striving and having your life together. And at the end of all this perfection and control, there's not going to be the peace you want. There's going to be more expectation and more responsibility. So,
and more insecurity, I would say, too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a song on the record called No One Can Steal Our Joy, but we control our way out of joy and we compare our way out of joy all the time. We wake up in the morning and God's we're told, let the peace of God rule in your heart. Almost like the peace of God is waiting at the walls of our heart, wanting to just flood in, and we don't let it, and we wake up and God's like, okay, I want to give you rest and joy and peace. And then we open up our Instagram and we immediately go, oh, my life isn't as good as this person. Oh, I don't have it together like this person. Oh, why don't we have more sales like that person? Or why don't we? And we compare ourselves out of joy. And when you just, God, I don't need to be considered a leader. I just need to follow you into joy and follow you into peace and follow you into love. That's when your life doesn't have to go a certain way because you already have the things that you need.
Mm-hmm. The art of following is true surrender, right? To discover really how to follow. I think it's interesting. I think we should talk about it since we're in election season. Not necessarily a political conversation, but but you talk about leadership, and this record's about followers, and we are obsessed to the nth degree with who our leader, in the free world will be. I think for those of us that are disciples of Christ, I feel like if we aren't cautious, we begin to trump the spiritual kingdom.
Oh, Trump?
Well, that wasn't a plug. I have no plug. I can't find who to plug. But, Yes, we begin to. Trump's the best word. I'm just gonna. So Trump, spiritual kingdom with our American kingdom. You know, we begin to trying to find this larger perspective, which I think the art of following is weighing into. But where do you find yourself in this? I mean, culturally. So as Americans, let's just speak. Like bring it back down. Yeah, who are you going to vote for first? I want to go down and say, who is everyone going to vote for and why? How are you finding your role as a disciple, as a follower in this interesting season as Americans?
I just want to lead off. I think it's funny how bent out of shape people get out of politics. They say it's our Christian duty to vote. I would say before it's your Christian duty to vote, the most repeated command in the Bible is do not be afraid. Your Christian duty is to not live a life of fear. That's your Christian duty. Of anything, if you had to summarize it, if that's the most repeated command, then that is of utmost importance to God, that you not live afraid, because it shows who He is. Like, that you can trust Him in a turmoil of political climate. You know, I mean, it's always interesting to me. You know, the Pharisees tried to get Jesus into that too. You know, like, hey man, you gonna pay who do you pay taxes to? And He said, render to Caesar's what Caesar's. Not and in doing so, you pay your taxes and you do vote, but you don't rest your hope in them. Mm-hmm. I don't rest my hope in democracy. I rest my hope in a, you know, to borrow from Derek Webb, my hope is in a king and a kingdom, not a man, a country, or a flag.
I know the deepest secrets of my heart at times, even as much as I try to follow Christ and model my life after Christ, I still find those times in my life where I go, man, I'm just a fallen man, you know, and I need a savior. And so we have to realize that politics are made up of a bunch of humans who are also fallen and are in need of a savior, and most of which maybe haven't found a savior. But I just kind of go, you know, at that point in time, for me personally, I go, who am I putting my trust in? And if I'm saying I need to, all my trust goes into whoever my next president is and the government of this country, then I'm bound to be disappointed. I'm bound to have some major issues coming up. But if I can fix my eyes on Christ and put my trust there and go, I know that this is a sure foundation, that this isn't going to be rattled, that God's going to be with me, whether it's Hillary or Trump or a third party, then kind of no matter what comes, at least your foundation is steady, right? And so no matter what hits you, you can still fall back on going, yeah, but God's the same. You know, the president's different, government's different, but God's still the same.
Well, I think all this comes back to actually us having to face real decisions of who we follow these days, maybe more than ever. There's not a cultural norm necessarily, or even a perception of that. But then there's this part in Philippians, you were quoting some of it earlier. We were talking about unity with Matt, and it talks about, of course, adopting the mindset of Jesus, the anointed. But then Paul ends with, so you can, in this translation called The Voice, is fantastic new translation, and it ends with, so you may shine like stars in the land. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what feels like this discussion that you guys are getting to about, in our surrender to being followers, we actually shine.
Well, yeah, and what would make you shine? If you fought for the issues and your guy won and you celebrate, it doesn't make you shine. Mm-hmm. Makes you go, yeah, well, that's what people do. Mm-hmm. But you know what would make you shine is even if the person that you were hoping in didn't get elected, if you were still confident and joyful, and still loved the people across the other side of the issue. Mm-hmm. That's what makes you shine, you know. And the great gift Jesus has given us is our Savior is no longer government.
Yes.
Our Savior is no longer who we voted for. Our Savior isn't any of these things. Our Savior is Him. So that's sort of like walking on water, you know.
Yeah. So, Ruben, who are you going to vote for?
No comment.
Every day I've been feeling the pressure. I always gotta know the plan. to let you leave, but you're changing my heart to want what you want, to love how you love, and that is enough. There's no greater plan. I need to know you only ask me to follow and want what you want. Want what you want. Want what you want. Want what you want. There's freedom in this surrender. I feel myself come alive, and that burden feels like a feather when I let my agenda die. And I get so tired of my own dreams when I am wired to let you leave, but you're changing my heart to want what you want, to love how you love, and that is enough. There's no greater plan. I need to know you only ask me to follow and want what you want. Want what you want. Want what you want. Want what you want. So many leaders, you ask for followers, so keep on leading, 'cause you're my father. So many leaders, you ask for followers, so keep on leading, 'cause you're my father. Keep changing my heart to want what you want, to love how you love. That is enough. There's no greater